hockey. Yeah.
My favorite.
It's Judd's Hockey Show.
And right now you're asking, whoa. Judd's Hockey Show. There's nothing going on. We just lost Jessi Pierce. What happened, Age?
I don't know. She flickered like a lantern, like a fire, and she's gone.
She's like, there's nothing going on. Why am I going to join these two yahoos? And she dropped off the show. Let's get her back. There she is.
There we
what
go.
happened?
Yeah,
What happened,
Jessi?
Jessi?
No idea.
That was weird.
Grand entrance. I wanted a grand entrance.
Oh, you had to come in special. I totally get that. I totally get that.
Makes sense.
Yep.
So, as I was saying before, Jess jumped off the show. You're thinking there's nothing going on, but that's not true. That's not true. Now, there is nothing going on necessarily with the Wild this week, but there is something to talk about. When the schedule first came out, I think it was in late June or so, I looked at the Wild opener, said, Columbus Blue Jackets at the X. Oh, boy, yeah. You know, Pascal Vincent. I don't care about this game. Well, it's on now because Pascal Vincent got blown out when Don Waddell went from his previous job at Carolina to become the Columbus GM, and he hired a new coach, and that coach has just been named. That is Dean Evason. So, Jessi, we now have an opening night in which Dean made it very clear he wants to beat his former team. You can tell he's still pissed off. So, suddenly some interest. Dean, a guy that you covered for quite a while here, his entire time, against the Wild at the X. Your thoughts?
I mean, the biggest question I have is, are we going to get a Dean Evason and Freddie Gaudreau tribute video that night, or is it just going to be one or the other, aka is Freddie going to join Dad, right? That's the big question. I'm excited. It gives a little bit of energy to that home opener on October 10th, as you'd mentioned. Dean saying this morning during his opening press conference, any coach that tells you those games don't matter, it's a crock of bull. But John Hynes is so muted too, right? Like he's just so laid back that it's like you're not going to get the Rick Bowness, Dean Evason type of vigilante. But it's fun. Good for Dean. I liked my time covering him, as I had mentioned to you guys before we started recording. I had sent him just a little text saying congrats. I thought he did a fine job here, and it'll be exciting to see him in the show. Exciting to see what he does with that woe is me weird, just Columbus Blue Jackets that I kind of have off in the corner. I never really pay much attention to.
Here's a question too. Is there a fighting chance that for that game, October 10th, right? Is there a chance that it also allows the Columbus Blue Jackets to see a familiar face, Patrik Laine, who the Wild has been connected to, I just saw he's working out with basketball players, doing dry land stuff, working his butt off, trying to get back. AJ, you think there's any chance that Dino is coaching against instead of coaching Patrik Laine?
Those two names to me don't seem like they're going to mesh super well. I like Patrik Laine.
Yeah,
Patrik Laine does not seem like maybe the skill fits into what Dean might want, but when it comes to like the toughness, the effort, the flashy suits that we see, that does not scream Dean Evason hockey. That doesn't really seem like a guy that he's going to buddy up next to on the flight to Minnesota. And when how many times Minnesota sports fans see this? Go back to Miguel Sano days with the Twins. Oh, he's in the best shape of his life. You see all these off-season workout videos, and he's in such a good shape. Doesn't matter. Still bad. Still won't be. You can only get in such good shape, but the health portion is a completely different aspect. So, for the sake of not making this move, I really hope the Wild don't do something like that to bring in a Laine. But in terms of will he potentially move somewhere else, I think so. I don't see Patrik Laine and Dean Evason exchanging like friendship bracelets anytime soon. I think they might exchange pleasantries, and the longest conversation is, all right, kid, we sent you here. Pack your bags. Have a nice flight.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think Patrik Laine is probably very vocal about how he wants to lead the team and how he wants to do things his way, and I don't think Dean Evason is a guy that will put up with that for too much, right? I think, as Age had mentioned, he likes those hard workers. He likes the Ryan Hartmans. He likes the Marcus Johanssons, the Folignos, the guys that are kind of in the mud. And Patrik Laine doesn't strike me as that type of player who's willing to do that. I feel like he kind of might walk a little bit on air is like, well, I'm Patrick Laine. I have this super skill set, right? Not to say I wouldn't want him. Again, I'm going to propose a trade. 1-for-1. Freddie for Laine. Boom. Let's do it. Make it happen. Why not?
The Freddie trade. So the Dean hire in Columbus might be to what you were alluding to before, Jess, as well, a gift from God. Like, if you're Bill Guerin, you've got to be on the phone, right? I mean, this is Dean's guy. And Dean, to Dean's credit, he did prop Gaudreau up. I mean, he got a good year from him. So, like, there was a confidence there, and it was shot last year. I mean, I've never seen a guy. I mean, he went from being a shootout wizard to, oh my God, the puck's on my stick and everyone's watching. I mean, I thought he was a mental mess. So is the gift from God the fact that Gaudreau almost certainly would waive whatever he has to get a return with Dean, and that I would think that you now have a legitimate chance of trading Freddie, and I don't really care what you get back as long as you get rid of the contract.
Yeah, I think that seems fair. Again, as we discussed last week too, looking at the roster depth and the projected lines, I don't want to, nor do I need to see a Freddie Gaudreau in that lineup. I would rather see your Marats. You're going to see your Yakov Trenin. I mean, there's other guys that deserve that spot, but unfortunately, there's that veteran presence that they're going to be like, oh, well, Freddie deserves to get. He's on a redemption tour. Like, well, prove something to me then. So I don't know. Plus, it'd be 2 Gaudreaus in Columbus, right? Johnny Gaudreau would be out there. Why not?
Yeah, it's a 15-team no trade that Freddie has. I've never understood how often that can be updated. Is it like there's a deadline at the beginning where it's like that's it for the year, or can they say, hey, do you want to revise that right now? Because maybe Columbus was on it last year, and then BG reaches out and says, hey, Freddie, anything changed for you in the past couple days? Anything you maybe want to alter? You do? Fantastic. Hey, Dean, I've got the guy for you. You're pretty familiar with him.
You can revise it. What I've heard been talked about from the National Hockey League insiders is that I think it's around July 1st that you have to submit the teams again. I don't know if it gets revised again or that's it, but it definitely can be revised. Now, who knows? In Gaudreau's case, the Blue Jackets, I don't know. Because you ordinarily block teams to cities that you don't want to go to, and or teams where you think that it's a bad fit, or so it's weird. But I just think that this gives Bill Guerin a chance to get out from under what with Dean gone is just a bad contract. And just I can't believe that John Hynes, and I know that this team loves its veterans, blah blah blah, right? But Gaudreau strikes me as a Dean project, a Dean guy. I can't imagine that John Hynes watched him and said, "Oh yeah. Oh boy, I see what Dean saw." So I got to think John Hynes would celebrate as well if they can dump him off.
Yeah, and again, I think I'm excited about this year and seeing John Hynes really, again, continue to put his fingerprints on this team, and that maybe that is sitting Freddie Gaudreau in the press box saying, you know what, I don't need to continue to play you. I saw what I needed to see from you last season. So that could be a move that he makes regardless of Freddie being on the move or being with this roster. But yeah, I think we all saw it. Again, whether Freddie was playing hurt or not, it was a bad year. And I think bad years are going to happen, but also at Freddie's age and the role that he's expected to play, the role the Wild need him to play, he can't have a bad year like that. And it's going to take a lot for him to rebound. It would take a lot for him to really put himself back in those good graces and to earn that right to be in the lineup when there are other young guys who I think are just as talented who deserve that. Yes, Freddie Gaudreau is a hard worker. And as we've mentioned time and time again, that's Dean Evason's bread and butter, right? That's everything he likes. And that's great, but it's not helping the Minnesota Wild win.
No. And has there ever been anybody that looks like they were born to be a Columbus Blue Jacket more than Freddie Gaudreau? Like, there's some guys where you look at it, like Owen Tippett. He got drafted, I think, by the Panthers, and it's like, okay, well, that's a weird fit. Now he's with the Flyers. Absolutely, he looks like a Flyer. The orange hair, like some guys that play for Boston, you're like, yeah, that's a Bruin. Freddie Gaudreau looks like a Blue Jacket. He was born to wear that jersey.
What does a Wild player look like?
I was thinking, who's a prototypical? Darby was. He's from here. He looked like a Wild player. Mm-hmm. I think that 03 team
kind of.
Yeah, but I think that 03 team Walls looked like a Wild player. Mm-hmm. Lunch, because I feel like the Wild is a lot of lunch pail, right? History. you just go and grind it out. I mean, that's what Jacques wanted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. Kirill really looks like, and plus the
Kirill's
dark.
not a wild. He's a New York Ranger. He's a Toronto Maple Leaf. He's a he's an original six.
He looks like a
superstar.
Vegas Golden Knight.
And you know what
Oh,
you're doing?
yeah.
You are talking about teams for the most part superior uniforms and colors. The dark forest green, it's more for guys like me just plodding through life.
You know what he looks like? He looks like a Detroit Red Wing. And maybe that's just the Russian. But imagine Kirill, and I hate thinking about this, but imagine Kirill in a Red Wing.
He'd be so mad. That's a downgrade.
When
for
he's
him
like
from
when he's like
Minnesota.
42 and it wants to sunset his career. Stevie Y. There you go.
I like that.
Wow. Well, and think of
I'm
to
gonna
your
get
point,
attacked.
think of all the Russian history and players he could tap into.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how the Wings were awful until that whole influx of Russians. But I'm with Jessi too. Sort of looks like a Broadway guy to me.
For some reason, and maybe it's because Panarin's out there, right? And I just feel like they're good buds and that would draw him. But I don't know. But then again, Kirill is quiet. You're right. Like, I don't think he'd love all that media attention. He doesn't dig that type of stuff, right?
I got to think deep in their hearts, I think the Russians love Florida as well.
Mm.
They love the warm
Why?
weather. There's no there's no state income tax. I think I mean, I could honestly see him as a Panther one day. By the way, I don't want this to happen. None of us are willing. Don't, before you get on your keyboards and annihilate us, none of us are, but yeah, Gaudreau does look like just a lunch pail blue jacket. That's a good one.
Yeah, I would agree.
So just who's your wild player? Like,
I think it's
poster child?
Darby. It's Darby or Zach. But again, I think it's because it screams Minnesota sports across the board. Joe Mauer, and you're like, you're Minnesota born. We're so proud of them. They're playing for the hometown team.
Yeah.
They're kind of vanilla in the way that they speak. They've got it all written out, right? Like there's nothing exciting about them. I'll just say that. Like there's just nothing too exciting or eccentric about them. They're just kind of there, which is okay. That's very Minnesota, very passive aggressive. They might give you a little jab here and there, but it's going to be passive aggressive on a Post-it note. And they're going to say, hey, how are you? Welp, it's time to go, and sail off into the sunset that way.
Or
Like
Koivu.
Matt
Koivu.
Cullen. Matt Cullen.
Matty
is kind of
Cullen.
Minnesota-
Yes.
Oh my God.
Nate
that
Prosser,
is
even. Every Minnesota-born
Yes.
player that's ever played for the Wild.
Pretty much, yeah.
Matt
That's it.
Cullen, 2 tours, and both of them were incredibly disappointing, sandwiched around real success elsewhere too.
Yeah.
Never
Dare I
understood that one.
dare I say Brock Faber?
See, but he's going to be good.
Yeah.
Like it's like I
yeah,
wouldn't put
but
TJ Oshie in this category.
That's the new
because
wave.
I think
That's the
he's
new
like
wave.
TJ Oshie.
I feel like Brock should be in a I think part of the problem though is if a player is good, I think the Wild jerseys scream plotting.
Yeah.
They
Plotting?
scream plotting players, muckers, grinders.
Oh,
like Brock
okay.
Faber's a skater.
I thought you were
Brock
saying, like,
Faber's really
schemers.
No. Plotting as in plotting skaters.
Okay.
And Zach was a mucker. I mean, he'd go in the corners. He got hurt because he spent a lot of his time in front of the net. Brock should be in a flashy, and this is why I want, well, partially or largely a new name, but a redesign as well. I feel like in the North Stars throwbacks, not because it was the North Stars, but because those jerseys are so much superior. I feel like when Brock takes off with the puck, it's like, yeah. But
They
when
look faster.
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Plotting.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think Brock could be a good LA King or like an Anaheim Duck or
he was gonna be a
something like
King.
that. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
but I
that's
think
true.
he'd fit that.
And in fact, Bill Guerin gets a lot of pushback, some of which he 100% deserves. But the Fiala trade is going to end up being like, I don't feel like we talk about that trade enough. We all said, well, he's going to lose that trade and there's nothing that he can do about it. And he, in my opinion, won the trade. That's one of the great trade. I mean, you got a star defenseman for a guy that scores goals, but he's streaky. And, he's a really good player, but I'm sorry. I think that Brock is a, knock on wood, 14-year, multiple All-Stars, Norris Trophy, perhaps.
Mhm.
That's one of the best. I think that's one of the best trades in Minnesota NHL hot history.
And people knew that they didn't have the leverage of like
That's
they,
what I'm saying.
they
Yeah.
knew they couldn't keep him. So yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely.
We all
Definitely.
said that trade's going to be a loss. Like there's nothing that they can do, and I think he
Right.
won the trade.
Absolutely.
Jessi, do we think that Dean now, and the Blue Jackets aren't there yet, but anyway, do we think that if and when they do improve, and that's the plan, and Don Waddell is a good GM, so they could improve. Do you foresee Dean winning in the playoffs? Because that was the thing that has trailed him forever. Like when you look at his playoff back to Milwaukee in the minors, it's awful. Do you think that he has the skill set, wound as tight as he is, to win in the playoffs?
Again, he has to get that team in order, right? And that largely relies on the general manager. I think Columbus needs to first get a good sniff into the playoffs. Right now, the way the teams can pull, I like Cole Sillinger there. I think Dean Evason's really going to like that as well. I think Dean has it in him, certainly, if he changes what he did here in Minnesota, if he changes his mentality, if he changes those married to his line combinations, right? Like, I think that's what was his undoing in the playoffs. No question. He didn't have any coach back. He didn't respond at all to any of those playoff first round exits. So I think if he changes that mentality, which I'm sure he will, I'm sure he's reviewed like every coach does. He spent this time not only traveling and hanging out with the wifey and the grandkids, but also figuring out and reassessing his game, which I think will be important. I don't see why he couldn't be successful. But again, I think his biggest challenge is the team itself. Right now, that roster is not built to even get to the playoffs, let alone make a run. But Don Waddell, I do trust in him. I like what he did in Carolina, as you'd mentioned. So it'd be interesting to see. But yeah, I think Dean himself would have it within him if he changes the coaching methods that he had while he was here.
I feel like he has to relax a little bit as well. I think he made, especially playoff time, I think he clenched up, and I think the entire team got tight. But yeah,
I wonder if part of that is the pressure here. You know what I mean? Like, most coaches shouldn't feel pressure, right? I get that, and players shouldn't. Yeah. But Minnesota's kind of a beast, and people are hungry, right? You're so hungry to get out that. So I wonder if being in Columbus, where there is less pressure there's less fan base that's probably as hungry as Minnesota was, maybe that helps. Again, that's just me throwing something out there. I don't know, but it could be so. There might be something there you can bite on, chew it.
And plus, like that, outside of, let's say you drop game one in the first round, everybody's like, oh, classic Minnesota, this team stinks, like they're done.
Yeah.
Immediately the entire fan base is like, yep, we're done with this team. And guys, we lost one game in overtime. Like, let's relax here. And I think his relaxing too, I'd be curious to know how much security he's going to have, because they're not going to be great this season. But the thing is, they have a couple decent players and pieces to like build around for the future. Fantilli, I think, is going to be a rock star. Cole Sillinger looks really good. They reached, I thought, on that Igor Chinikov a couple years ago, where like the NHL Network didn't have a video package for that guy in the first round because they were like, we don't know anything about him.
Who is this person?
Exactly. And Johnny Gaudreau is Johnny Gaudreau, whether he, wants to score or not. But they have a future there at some point, but they're going to be bad for probably the next 2 or 3 years. They just need to give him time to is that going to be something he can build and have a Fantilli and Sillinger lead the way and take the reins from Boone Jenner, who at some point is probably going to have to toss that C onto one of their chests.
He's gotta, right?
Right. I think Boone and Dean are going to be best friends.
So good.
I think that seems like his ideal NHL player.
As long as Dean doesn't go into that locker room asking to see people's phones, he'll be fine, right?
Oh, the Babcock thing, yeah. What a complete cluster bleep.
Unbelievable.
Now I did think Waddell went a bridge too far in the press conference with Dean, because they attempted to draw some comparisons with the fact that Waddell gave actually Rod Brind'Amour his first chance in Carolina, and both were gritty players. Brind'Amour was a better player, but they both profiled, the same way. Worked their asses off as players. But I'm sorry, and I know that Rod the Bod has not won a cup, correct? But his teams have had a lot of success. I'm sorry, I can't draw that comparison. Having seen Dean here and Rod the Bod's teams with the Canes, I'm not willing to draw a line just because there were playing similarities between Brind'Amour and Evason.
It's a different type of toughness. Rod isn't going to put up with anything. And Dean certainly didn't either. But he still kind of always, to me, I felt like Dean sometimes always felt like second fiddle, right? We've talked about in the past when he was under Billy Guerin, that he was kind of Bill Guerin's puppet. And it always felt like he was always in this, assistant role mentality, whereas Rod is definitely a leader. He's definitely your head coach. He's definitely this guy who is going to make those decisions. And again, Dean is tough, but also it's a different toughness. It's like mom and dad toughness, right? Like mom is tough, but she's still going to say like, I love you anyway, where dad's like, nope, I'm not doing this. You're done.
Right.
We're taking a time out, right? Like it's just a different level of toughness and grittiness isn't the right word, but like seriousness or attitude, if you will, that I think Rod has that Dean doesn't have.
I get the impression, and we obviously don't cover the Hurricanes, but I get the impression that when Rod scratches a guy, it's because Rod scratches the guy. To go back to that Parisi thing, right? Where Parisi got scratched because he didn't leave the ice and he cost his team and against the Golden Knights. And then I think their next game was like against the Avs and Zach got scratched. I always sensed that was Guerin. Like I didn't sense that Dean alone said, you're scratched. I sensed that was a mutual thing. And probably the first call was made by Bill. So yeah, you're right. It feels like Brind'Amour carries a ton of respect and I think his players like him, but it feels like he is the authority.
Yes,
It
that's
never
the word.
really
Authority.
felt. It never really felt like Dean was the authority. He had authority, but I'm with you. It always felt like Billy was, telling him a little bit more. I don't know that Don Waddell was telling Rod Brind'Amour what to do, Age.
And I get like wanting to maybe look for that kind of narrative and comparison, but one guy's won a Jack Adams Award.
Yeah.
Like I think was it 2021 that
wasn't the year he
Brind'Amour won
beat
it?
Dean? Didn't he beat Dean? Because Dean was
I
a
think
finalist
so.
for the Jack Adams, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think did he finish second or third that year?
I think Dean
Doesn't
was
matter.
third.
Let's take a look, guys.
Nobody
I think
remembers
Dean was
the
third.
but
Jessica
yeah, I mean, and that's the separator is like he's clearly a step above, not just in the voting, but in the sake of like being a motivator, having that authority, a locker room general, being able to kind of dictate and relate to those guys, but also if they need a kick in the shorts, he's going to give it to them. So, and Dean, I think probably can do a lot of those things, but it's just maybe not as well. So for the sake of like what he did here and now taking the next step in his career, I really hope he is successful. And it's going to be really easy to root for him as somebody just not even in the same division, but different conference, kind of like the what is it, the sister of the Wild in the sake of the 2000 expansion team. So it makes a lot of sense storyline wise, but it'll be a really fun opening night as the Blue Jackets take on the Wild.
It was in 21. The other nominees were Rod, who did win it that year, and Joe Quenneville of the Florida Panthers. So with Q in there, I imagine Dean probably finished third. Just guessing.
I think he did. And since you brought that up, it is incredible. If you had asked me when Stan Bowman got fired by the Blackhawks and subsequently suspended, and of course we don't need to go into chapter and verse, but it was because of some really egregious things that he didn't pay attention to. If you had asked me the day that he got fired and suspended and Quenneville did, right? And Quenneville was also blamed. He was not the GM. He was the coach. If you had said, okay, Judd, in July of 2024, Bowman's going to get the Oilers GM job and Quenneville is still not going to be working, I would have said, you're crazy. Quenneville's going to be the first guy to get some type of job back. I am absolutely shocked. One, because Q is a really good coach. Two, because I would think if I was an organization, as they say in Canada, that Bowman to me was the GM. He had far more, I'm guessing, right? Intelligence about what was going on. So I am absolutely surprised that Bowman got a job. Quenneville hasn't yet. Given that, one, I think Quenneville is more talented at what he does than Bowman is. And the fact that if I was to guess who knew more and ignored it, I'd say Bowman, not Quenneville.
Right. Because Q reported it to his bosses, which is Bowman, right? Like that's kind of what happened as far as we're being told and as far as we know. Yeah, it's surprising that anybody wants to touch that media nightmare with a 10-foot pole. And it was everything that transpired after with them not having jobs for as long as they've had thus far makes sense. There needs to be punishment there. But yeah, it's shocking. It's puzzling that Edmonton wants to dip their toe into that with Connor McDavid even as well.
Yeah, I agree.
I think the telling sign is the owner or one of the majority owners of the Oilers, if you wanted to go to his Twitter/X account today. It mysteriously turned private. So, for the flood of congratulations and pats on the back that I'm sure that he is receiving today.
The Oilers don't, I'm surprised too, I think what Jessi said, I'm surprised they're the team doing this.
Yeah. It's
Like
weird.
there's some certain franchises I'd be like, of course they are. But this is going to cause, I would think, among some consternation and some distractions. And the Oilers feel like they're on the precipice of finally being a Stanley Cup champion. And it's weird. All right. Last question for you. Since we're on the coaching thread. As you said, Jess, we don't know a ton about John Hynes yet. Like we know a little bit, but we're going to learn more. At the end of the day, starting with 2024-25, do you think, with what you do know right now, that John Hynes was the right guy for this job, or would you have preferred, in retrospect, to name an interim coach when Dean was fired, and then to have conducted a search after the season?
I mean, you look at what John Hynes was able to do and the way he was able to turn the team around. You can't deny that he had that right level. He had that right tone. I think it still stands out to me that when, you go back to the day he was hired and he had told Brock Faber, hey, I'm not here to pull you guys out of the hole. I'm here to get in that hole with you. And I think that speaks volumes. And I think that's what this team needed. They needed another guy that was on their side, because Dean very much was on their side. I think every player was disappointed within themselves that they caused Dean's firing, right? I still don't, it just wasn't the sexy hire. And I like the sexy hire once in a while, right? I still look back, John Hynes in his pedigree of coaching hasn't achieved much either, right? He hasn't done a heck of a whole lot. He's not much different from Dean Evason. But I do need to give credit where credit's due. I think he did a good job with the team last year. I'm just curious. I think this year for me is going to really make that. I still maybe would have preferred an interim just to give it a little bit more time to breathe. But, again, I can't say I don't hate the hire at the time, because he did do some really good things so far with Minnesota. And I think this year is going to be, again, kind of his year, his breakout, his breakthrough year. Hi, this is who I am, right? Whether that's good or bad, I think this year is going to be the year that we're like, okay, this was the right hire.
Yep. Or not.
Yeah, or not.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. At the time, I feel the same way. It didn't feel like a hiring that it was so quick too, which I think caught me off guard, because it was, hey, Dean's gone. 90 minutes later, hey, by the way, we found our guy. Hope you like it. This is what we got. You might have heard of him. But yeah, it's I'm not going to judge him too much based on what Hynes was thrown into, because it was a really poor situation. And if you show up to a house fire and all you have is a beach bucket next to you, you can only put out so much of that fire. But when it comes to what he can do now with a fresh slate, a full season heading into, that's where I'm really going to judge. Do I think it was the right decision to hire him? No, but it also maybe wasn't the wrong one, because he did show a lot of promise in what he was handed, like the pace and kind of the underlying numbers. If you remove everything that happened before he came in, there is promise there, but I want to see, now that he's able to have more of a say and everything is more implemented and he really has both hands on the wheel, what can John Hynes do with the Minnesota Wild?
Jessi Pierce,
since you mentioned fire, though, this is what
go.
I was doing. I was putting his fire suit
Oh,
on.
nice.
So I just thought that was quite
That's
ironic.
awesome.
I was like, oh, you can stick around. We'll use you as my little prop child for a minute.
That's
Thank you,
awesome.
prop child.
What a mom.
Yep, I know.
She does it all. No, I'm serious. I'm not kidding. It's a big job.
He smells like poop. I don't really know what's going on with him right now. So there's a concern there,
How old is
but
he?
it's fine. He's 5. That doesn't stop him from wearing 2 different shoes, usually on the wrong feet. I'm excited for him to go to Matamita, and they're going to kick him out. They're going to be like, he's not smart enough for this. I don't know. He's a middle child. He's a wild card, man.
Yeah, he's a wild
today
card.
He's ranked number 1, though. He is my favorite today. So.
Wow. So we do daily rankings? It changes by the day?
Yeah, isn't that what Dion said, to daily rank them? Maybe it's a week thing. You're right. It
That's
could
fine
be.
with me. I got no problem with it. Hey, I don't have kids, so you know what? You can rank them by the hour for all I care. The Hynes thing, the one thing that concerns me is he has fallen, and I mean, this is such a hockey coach thing, though. He's fallen already into the journeyman trap. In New Jersey and Nashville, and there's now I know that Bill liked him, and clearly Bill was talking to him well before Dean got fired. Like, they clearly talked. So I like the fact that there's a relationship there. who would have been your, if perfect world, Jess, who would have been your sexy hire of a person that was available? Let's say if they had waited until, May 1st to make the hire.
Gallant was available, wasn't he, at the time?
I
Yeah,
believe
he
so,
was.
yes.
Yeah,
He was.
I would
No,
have gone
he's-
with him. I
I think-
really enjoy him.
I think he's known for being a real players coach, though. So I think the Rangers freaked
Sure.
out because he was too soft.
Yeah.
And he's a guy who's been around the block too. The guy that was a gift from God, and Dean was coach here, so it was not possible, was when Bruce Cassidy left Boston.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a hell of a coach. I'm curious if there is another act for because I think eventually Pittsburgh's going to fire Mike Sullivan. I'm curious if because I think
USA guy. Billy will
I think
take him.
he's a good coach there, but yeah.
Speaking of USA guys, my sexy hire, if you want to go with that, he was out of the
that's it.
game for a while, but now he's back in with the Kraken. I would have liked to see Bilesma.
I've heard
Danny,
very mixed things about him.
really?
I've heard
Yeah.
Like,
very
he-
mixed things.
The
The
I
Buffalo
just
people
remember.
can't stand him.
I just remember him being like, and maybe because I was younger, but I just remember him being like a good coach, and that's like reading about him just winning and all this stuff. And then it was a long absence from the NHL, so I don't know. It was just one of those like his name was still out there. Why would they not? But we'll have to see what he does in Seattle.
Peter
Absolutely.
Laviolette was my number one if he was available, right? Like he wasn't available, but I love me some Lavi. I just do.
Do you
Which
really?
is funny because I do tend to hate coaches that are just recycled, and he is one of the most recycled
Oh,
coaches
God.
in the league. But I love him. I mean, John Cooper tops the list too. But do you know Coop doesn't talk to media like every day, like you're supposed to? Like they have the assistant coach talk half the time.
Does he just get like
no
fined
kidding.
or what?
He just does. I think they just have to have a coach. I don't think it says the head coach because when he was here in Tampa, or when he was here, excuse me, playing the Wild toward the end of the year, I was like, oh, who? I don't want to talk to you. Like, is Coop around? And that's what he does apparently. And like everybody just accepts it. Like, okay.
I think Coop's next job might be TV because that guy is phenomenal. And I don't think Tampa Bay is going to fire him. I think he's going to eventually quit. And I don't know. I mean, if you look at what was available to Guerin potentially, I don't know that it's because it is a lot of recycled guys because that's the way this league works. The Carl dude with the Pioneers intrigues me. Could he make the step
David
from
Carl?
college? Yeah.
Yeah, he's very. I think he
I keep
could. I
thinking
think
Matt
he's
'cause-
so ready.
Yeah.
Like, and you look at. I mean, the same thing has been said about Scott Sandland, and now that's kind of quieted because the Bulldogs have quieted down. So I'd be curious, but
True.
David Carl, like Sandland, has won at a lot of different levels, and again, he's a USA guy, right? That was a big kind of discussion after the Pioneers won this year in St. Paul. Like, oh, is he ready to do that? I think
Right.
so. I think a lot of GMs are keeping an eye on that organization because he's done some really good things. Because even this year, I went to peg the Pios to go in and win, right? Like I was like, no way Denver's going to beat Macklin Celebrini, or no way he's going to beat Will Smith. So it was just kind of he'd be a good coach. I like that. I like that call, Judd.
Final thought, Age?
Congrats to Dean with this hiring now. He's thrust himself into the rotating wheel that is NHL coaches, where every time, if he does get fired,
Yeah, he'll
he's
be back.
going to get another job because it seems like nobody ever wants to go with somebody new. So he's at least going to be in contention for every job that he has after the Blue Jackets.
Yeah. And in fact, I saw a Royce tweet. He's predicting 5 jobs for Dean.
Okay.
He's a little old. I don't know. He's going
5
to get
head
to 5.
coaching jobs too, to be
Yeah,
specific.
he's 50. Yes, 5 head coaching jobs. He's 59. I don't know. He's going to get up to 5. It's possible.
Be some pretty quick turnaround for
But
one.
That'd
3
be
or
a lot
4
of
for
quick
sure.
firings. Yeah. Did they release how long is he signed for? Or like
I've not seen that. And
they never
and
do that
here's
for
my-
coaches usually. But.
Here's my question too: how much does this mean the Wild won't have to pay him? Because he was fired with term left, correct?
Yeah,
Yes.
it was. They signed him to a 3-year, and he had 2 left, maybe.
So
right?
this is gonna. So I think it offsets in the sense that Columbus now, his salary with Columbus will negate what the Wild has to pay, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so Evason was making just under $2 million with the Wild, and so that and it runs through this coming season. So the Blue Jackets might be able to get a little bit of a discount.
So they
Freddie
might
Gaudreau's
have.
getting paid more than he is, man. I don't.
Oh God, are you kidding? Yeah.
I don't even say that.
So's the janitor in Columbus. All right, you guys. Thank you very much. She's Jessi. Check her out. Covers thewildnhl.com and also Bardown Beauties. He's AJ. I'm Judd. We'll talk to you later.